Welcome to the Wizard and Wireless Network podcast with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, grab a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN.
So, welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming on all your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's show, we'll be talking about The Vanishing Glass from the Philosopher's Stone.
Yes.
So, interestingly, with all the chapters so far, obviously this is only the second chapter in, but essentially this has been kind of, in terms of movie-wise, essentially so far playing out as the books have. And actually, it's giving you even more insight into how horrible the Dursleys are.
Yeah, they're vile.
Yeah. And actually how they've even treated Harry with something as simple as Dudley's birthday.
Exactly. It really just does goes to show the complete contrast between the two of them. It's on one hand you've got this absolutely spoiled brat who is getting everything brand new, everything given to him on a plate. But then you've got Harry who is getting Dudley's cast-offs, his second hands, everything that Dudley had. I mean, there's not a single piece of clothing that fits Harry perfectly. There's nothing that is Harry's on his own.
And likewise, if you put it into comparison with the presents that Harry's been getting, and actually the fact that the last present was a coat hanger, you kind of see the stark difference between the two of them. And actually, it's almost like they don't even care that most of Dudley's attitude towards presents. He doesn't care. He just cares about the amount of presents that he's getting and the flashiness of it. He doesn't actually care about the presents themselves at all.
No, it is just quantity over quality.
Yeah. And the fact that he's got no disregard to having broken nearly all of them because he knows that he'll just get more things next year, Christmas. Aunt will bring some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He just takes everything for granted because he knows he is the golden boy and he can do no wrong.
So, I mean, this chapter introduced Dudley's friends as well into the mix.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, I was a bit sad that I didn't really get to see much of them in the movie, apart from when you get to see them in the Order of the Phoenix. But you don't see them at all throughout the Philosopher's Stone film. I mean, you've got Piers Polkiss and the rest of all of his other cronies, but you just don't see them, which is a shame because I feel like they could have added a lot to the whole stark contrast between the hatred that Harry gets in the Muggle world compared to the love that he gets in the Wizarding world.
Yeah, so actually it would have highlighted even more of that differentiation between, like you said, that hatred he's getting from Muggles, but then the admiration he gets when he steps into Diagon Alley and like everyone knows his name, everyone knows who he is, and everyone wants to be around him and get to know him. Whereas it's almost the complete opposite of like, no, you don't exist.
Exactly. It's like from the moment he steps into Diagon Alley, everyone wants to shake his hand, everyone wants to, say, welcome back. But Harry's just completely dumbfounded at that because he's never had that amount of admiration or respect.
I think this is what was kind of lacking in the films, is the fact that it just doesn't... You get a little glimpse of what the Muggle life is like, but it doesn't really hit hard as it does in the books.
Yeah.
So having had more introduction to Muggle life, it would have accentuated that differentiation. Let's talk about kind of Dudley's friends for a second, because the way that they're described in the books, and actually I think it's Pierce that looks like a rat.
Yep.
And I just found it quite funny. Like, it's your stereotypical kind of like, this is what a bully looks like.
Yeah.
And each friend of Dudley's fits into those categories of like, we all knew that one kid at school who looked like a rat, who was the overweight bully.
Yep.
It's just your stereotypical kind of like, these guys could not be more stereotypical than how they're portrayed.
It's almost comical, and I think that was pretty much what it was meant to be, to sort of not leave that much to the imagination, because it went into quite a lot of detail as to, you know, their appearance and how vile they absolutely were. And I think that was the whole point of it, to sort of say, this is what, there's no blurred lines here. These are your stereotypical bullies, and they are just as horrible as you can imagine them to be.
Yeah. And I think actually like you said, that's what's kind of missing, is you don't get that sense of Dudley being a bully to Harry. Like, he's not nice to Harry in the films, but he's a real bully to him in the books. Like, this is someone who you do not want to be around. He's just not a nice person.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even so much like teasing, you know, between like brother, sister, or even cousins in this case, but it's just like sheer vindictiveness. It's just evil.
Yeah, exactly.
It is just evil. But I suppose it does sort of beg that question as to why is Dudley like that? But I know there's this theory that's sort of been floating around about, you know, the fact that Harry is a Horcrux, and the reason that the Dursleys are so horrible to him is because he is a Horcrux. I personally don't buy that. They're just dicks.
Yeah, I think if that was the case, there would be more of that rippling out to other people that Harry comes into contact with.
Exactly. I mean, when you think about it, the whole way throughout the Wizarding World, I mean, don't get me wrong, no one is perfect, and you can't please or like everyone. Just sort of the same element being Harry did have some enemies and people just didn't liken to him, but that's not because it was a Horcrux.
No.
It's just different personality clashes.
Exactly. And if you think about how much it affected Ron when he wears the necklace,
exactly,
how much he actually changes and how much it influences him, surely if that was the case with Harry, there would be much kind of obvious reaction to that. But there isn't.
No.
So I'm personally not buying that theory.
No, me either.
Talking of Harry being a Horcrux.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the chapter where we see him start talking to snakes.
Yes.
So obviously, haven't been introduced to Parseltongue before, and in the books, it doesn't give a hint that it is Parseltongue because we just see it as a normal conversation.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of the introduction to Harry being able to talk to snakes as a little side hustle?
It's like a little breadcrumb. I mean, it was never mentioned again up until the Chamber of Secrets when it became this big thing. But I suppose when we sort of see it, we just think, oh, okay, you know, fine, he can, you know, to snakes. But that's it. It's you don't really think about it that much.
Yeah.
And then obviously your sort of attention is diverted away from that fact because all of a sudden Dudley's behind the cage. He's fallen through the vanishing glass and is then all of a sudden became the attraction at the zoo. And then you don't really think about it again at all. I mean, I know that I certainly didn't, not until the Dueling Club in Chamber of Secrets, and then it became this big massive thing. It was like gag of the season. This boy, the boy who lived, can all of a sudden talk to snakes,
and that's not a normal thing that other people can do.
I know. I mean, and the thing is, but I mean, when you sort of think about it, Harry himself, he just thought of like, oh yeah, no, yeah, I can totally do that. I mean, it was an accident, but just once. I mean, a load of people can do it.
Yeah.
And then Hermione and her all knowing, like, well, no, actually not. It's not a very common gift, Harry. And he's like, all right, well, sorry, excuse me.
Excuse me, because I thought everyone could do it. So just because I'm a bit ignorant to the Wizarding world.
I know, excuse me, I've lived under a cupboard for the best part of 10 years.
Yeah, I haven't spent 10 years in a library.
Exactly.
But I mean, like...
Your parents might have been dentists. Mine were abusers. Aunt and uncle.
And I think, the trouble for me is, like, in any kind of case, knowing, like, how people are inducted into Hogwarts, surely there must be some sort of conversation that people have of, like, oh, so what was the first thing that you noticed that was kind of magical? Like, that never happens between kind of Ron, Harry and Hermione.
Yeah, I mean, it was never really a conversation that they had.
But surely that's kind of like the first question that you'd want to know. If that's like how people are picked to go to Hogwarts, or kind of like your kind of first time, like you would ask.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like that, old adage, what was your first time like? Like, when did you first, start doing magic?
Yeah.
And such like.
So I'm just surprised that it never came up in conversation until kind of like the Chamber of Secrets, where then it's out for the whole school to see.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really nice little nod and hint to Harry speaking Parseltongue, but I feel like it definitely should have come up in conversation a bit more.
Yeah, and I suppose the more that you sort of think back and look at it, Harry then speaking to snakes initially at the beginning of Philosopher's Stone, and then coming into Hogwarts, and it gets all of a sudden that internal struggle of not being so desperately wanted to be sorted into Slytherin.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sorting Hat then saying, oh, you could be great, in Slytherin. And it's almost like, as I said again, little breadcrumbs sort of leading up to everything that we know.
Yeah, like,
come the Chamber of Secrets.
It wasn't the lion enclosure that Dudley fell into.
Well, exactly. Exactly, that's the thing. I mean, there's not a random Hufflepuff, rolling about with badgers.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, I mean, like, to have it being a snake and being Parseltongue that Harry's speaking, again, like you said, it's that little breadcrumb that gets put in.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your theory of the snake being Nagini?
I'm all for it. I mean, I shan't lie to you. I think it's fab. I really do wish that if and when at some point down the line they do decide to do some more Fantastic Beasts films, I want a Nagini origin story. I want to know how this beautiful Maledictus ended up coming to Albania and seeing Voldemort. I just really need to know. I need to know the gossip.
They actually kind of
how
came.
did this happen? Is there like a Horcrux Tinder? Did he all of a sudden go, oh, you're quite cute, swipe right, I'll put part of my soul in you? I need to know these things. I need to know. People have to know.
I'm now really curious. Is there a Horcrux Tinder?
I mean, what is the prerequisite?
Exactly. I think it's one of those things that's just never been clarified about what the requisitions are. Like, it can't just be an object because Nagini's alive, Harry's alive, so
exactly.
It can be in people.
It can be.
But I mean, I'm definitely all for a Nagini spin-off.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how that... I think that was the one thing that I was looking forward to the most in Fantastic Beasts, is actually having Nagini be a name drop and a character within it, and not seeing any of that kind of connection of she's a nice, caring person, but then turns into Nagini.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
where's the trauma?
Where is the trauma? What was the moment that pushed her over the edge?
So, kind of overall thoughts of chapter 2, because I mean, it really, the Vanishing Glass kind of starts and stops with the trip to the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't give you any more than that. So for me, it's a very short, to the point chapter. But I mean, what are your thoughts on the overall chapter?
I mean, the overall chapter, the thing is, as you would say, you can see J.K. Rowling's writing style progress as the books go on. And I think given this was our first of the Harry Potter books, you can see that it was possibly a bit of a filler chapter. But it was good in the sense because it was more breadcrumby.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would say, because I mean, I think looking back, you could probably have put a hell of a lot more of stuff into that. Because when you look at chapters like The Order of the Phoenix or The Half-Blood Prince, it's just a lot more chunkier. There's a lot more action that's sort of going on, and it's not so much action as such, but I feel like now, looking back, you would be able to say, oh, you could put that in there, you could put that in there, you could put that in there. But I mean, overall, it was a great chapter because it was, I mean, Dudley, for one, got his comeuppance to an extent. Mm-hmm. And it just, I feel like it was very well portrayed quite well in the film.
Yeah. Because
it just did sort of show how hysterical Aunt Petunia is over anything bad happening to Dudley.
And more so like anything embarrassing.
Exactly.
because it goes back to what we were saying about the characters themselves, of like, she has to be the perfect, pristine family, like no embarrassment. They can't be seen to be like, they can pick out other people doing things wrong in public spaces, but God forbid that they do it themselves.
Well, exactly.
So actually, they kind of all get a bit of a backslap.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Dudley getting his comeuppance, but Petunia actually being shown up in public as well. So, yeah, I think overall, like, I do agree that it does feel like a bit more of a filler chapter.
Yeah.
But
there's nothing wrong with that in any way, shape or form.
But the thing is, it doesn't feel like a filler chapter because you still got breadcrumbs in it.
Yes.
It's still giving you little details of, even though actually, one, nothing really happens, but it actually still gives you that breadcrumb for the Chamber of Secrets. So there's still a thought process behind kind of the information that she's giving you.
Yeah, I mean, sort of put it this way. If you're a first-time reader, it might feel like a filler chapter. As someone who has done numerous rereads, it's not, because you're like, that's going to come up. That's coming up. Oh, I see what you did there. Kind of type thing.
Yeah. It's still a good chapter, but I feel like if it's one of those ones where, if you think about how they're going to do, like, if they do the TV series as a chapter by chapter, episode by episode.
See, this is the thing. Will they add more stuff in to fill that out?
And then it becomes a real filler episode.
Yeah.
Because it already is a filler chapter with one thing happening that's kind of a breadcrumb.
Yeah.
But nothing really happens in it. So actually, to have a whole hour-long episode going to the zoo, I don't see that working.
No. I mean, I suppose what they could do is, put a bit more beefing into the characters, as it were. So, for example, a bit more character building for the Dursleys, a bit more character building, seeing Piers Polkiss, the rest of Dudley's bully friends, seeing their parents, seeing where they live, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just to sort of add to the world a bit more. Yeah.
I suppose so. I think it's whether or not we then need to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I get it. That'd be interesting to get a bit more background, a bit more information and everything. But it's whether or not it detracts too much, because there's so many TV shows now that are hour-long episodes. But actually, if it slows down the pace, what is the benefit of having an hour-by-hour episode?
Exactly.
So, yes, it would be nice to get a bit more background, but actually, is it even really that relevant? Because realistically, Dudley's friends, they are just background characters. We don't need a spin-off. Mm-hmm. We don't need a Piers Polkiss spin-off show.
No, we do not.
I'd like them to try and incorporate maybe this chapter into one of the other episodes, so it's not a chapter by chapter.
Yeah. It would be very interesting to sort of see what they are going to do with the whole episode layout.
Mm.
As in, are they going to have a chapter by chapter, as in episode by episode? Because I find it very difficult. I mean, how many chapters has the Order of the Phoenix got? Over 30 at least.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a 30
episode season.
An episode season. I mean, it's not Grey's Anatomy.
No. Like, we're not talking about Friends. We're not talking about Hobby City. It is a case of this is going to be condensed at some stage.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to get a 10 episode per season?
Yeah.
And therefore chapters are condensed down?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what they do with it.
Yeah.
So would there be anything in this chapter that you would necessarily change?
I don't really think so. I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, I would struggle to find anything to put in or take out of it. Because I think, as I say, if you're reading The Philosopher's Stone for the first time, you would think there's not really much going on in this chapter apart from Harry's, probably say, initial display of power to us as a reader and as a viewer. But I wouldn't really know what else to put in it or take out of it.
But do you think it's then a bit of a... I know you've said it's a filler chapter, but would you have condensed it down even further? Would you have written it as maybe a bit of a chapter, whereas actually it wasn't a full chapter itself.
I mean, you could probably have divided that chapter over chapter 1 and chapter 3.
Yeah.
Or even just put chapter 2 in with chapter 3.
Yeah, and had it just a bit more of a chapter going on, but that wasn't the main point.
Yeah, no.
Because I think reading through it, you kind of end up going from chapter 2 into chapter 3, and it is a follow-on.
It is, and it sort of goes from like 0 to 100 very quickly.
Yeah.
As in, let's go to the zoo. All of a sudden, you've got this big bear of a man knocking down your door, telling this boy he's a wizard.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what's happened here?
Yeah. Like, it really kind of ramps up very quickly between those two chapters.
Yes.
Do you think actually having it in there as to kind of slowly build up the chapters was a good idea?
Definitely, yeah.
So obviously, we've had the huge introduction to the Wizarding World with the introduction of 3 of the main characters plus Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's kind of, let's go back to the Muggle world. Let's kind of rewind a bit. Actually, we've moved on 9 3/4 years.
Yep.
This is now where Harry's living. This is his situation, and this is kind of the situation he's in.
Yeah.
I think it was probably a better idea to have that kind of slower pace because you're kind of resetting. You've reset into the fact that the Muggle world is boring, but you're now seeing Harry at the age that he's going to be.
Yes.
And I think what's then quite nice is the fact that you then have the, not necessarily stark contrast, but the fact that it's been so long since the fall of Voldemort, but nothing's changed in terms of the Muggle world. Like, they're none the wiser. Nothing in the real world has changed. Wizards hasn't suddenly like come out and are everywhere. They're still in hiding, and we've carried on pretty much as we were.
Yeah.
So I think actually in that regards, the reset was fairly justified because you've got your kind of prelude with chapter 1, and then chapter 2 is really kind of the start.
Yeah.
How did you find that the adaptation worked?
I mean, I thought it was very good. I thought for the chapter, for what it was short, it was sweet, and it was very well condensed, and it was very well portrayed in film. Yeah.
I mean, literally, it almost feels like a word-for-word
adaptation.
In the movies. And actually, the fact that like we said, it's almost like chapter 1 is the first part of the film. Chapter 2 is literally the next part of the film. And so far, they have done it in terms of an adaptation, stuck very closely to the books.
Mm-hmm.
The only obviously bit is that kind of wider EU bits of having Dudley's friends being a part of it. So I mean, I'm not really going to go too much into kind of the wider EU because we've really talked about Nagini being potentially the snake that's kept in captivity. I mean, you've got the argument of the fact that, well, if it was raised in captivity, how could it have been Nagini?
Exactly.
But does it say that the snake's from Albania?
Not necessarily. I think it said it's from Brazil, but it was bred in captivity. So is it Nagini? Doubtful, if going by that.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the fan theory of it being Nagini, but I think actually the evidence is overwhelming.
The evidence is overwhelming. We have the receipts.
And I just don't think the story marries up.
No. Other plausible theory. There was 2 snakes called Nagini.
Dun, dun, dun.
One of which was a maledictus. Thanks.
Not stereotyping that we all have.
I was going to say. Yeah.
I'm just stereotyping myself in that camp at this point. I'm not one to talk.
Well.
So, I mean, what did you like the chapter?
Yeah. I mean, if you ask me this question at the end of every chapter episode, my answer will always be, yes, I did. But I'm very biased.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there are a few chapters that I don't particularly like, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
I mean, like we've said, this is a filler episode. This is a filler chapter. And it's not boring, but it's not the most exciting thing that happens. It could be worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think this chapter kind of like neatly ties in with the first chapter and goes into the third chapter? Do you think it's a good bridge? So we said it's obviously filler, but do you think it's a good bridge chapter then?
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually where this stops off in terms of they've just gotten back home and it goes into then what will be chapter 3.
Yeah.
Okay. I think actually that's the one thing that's almost overlooked with the movie adaptation, is the fact that it almost kind of, this is one thing happening after the next. So yeah, in the books it's kind of, this is one thing that's happening after the next, but in the films it's almost like this happens maybe a month later, you've got the letters arriving.
Yes.
Whereas this is meant to be one thing after the next, after the next, after the next, very quick succession. Nothing has happened for 9 years, and now suddenly
it's all happening.
It's all kicking off.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, it does work well for a bridge episode because you've kind of skipped the 9 years, come straight in, and everything's happening.
Yeah.
But it is one of those chapters that you just kind of have to get through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, overall then, the chapter itself, we've said, is pretty much just a filler chapter. It's got some good breadcrumbs. Mm-hmm. But otherwise...
Tasty breadcrumbs.
Very tasty breadcrumbs, but one that you're not going to taste for quite a while.
Yes.
But essentially, it is what it is. You just have to get through it. But it's not a bad chapter.
God, no.
And the thing is what's quite nice is it's a short and sweet chapter. You can get through it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for tuning back into the Wisdom Wireless Network. I have been Will.
I have been AJ.
So join us next week for our Folio Universitas episode, and we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.